Hello, welcome to Ildefonso Inc. This is our YouTube channel, and today we are talking to my friend Jonathan Hall, also known as J Hall, also known as Gentlest Gentleman, and today we're going to break down some of his songs. So, Jonathan, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Hello, my name is Jonathan Hall. I'm an artist, songwriter, guitar player, sometimes producer. And I write music under the name Gentlest Gentleman.
Why don't you tell us where the name Gentlest Gentleman came from?
Sure. Well, I'm a huge Sufjan Stevens fan, and there was a performance that I saw online a while back. Not sure where it was, but there was another artist performing with him in his band called My Brightest Diamond. And she's an amazing artist. Definitely recommend listening to her. But she has a song called Gentlest Gentleman that I really love. And I don't know, I just was inspired. And I felt like that really connected with the kind of music that I was writing and kind of the artist that I am. So yeah, that's kind of where it comes from.
And then where would you say that you're based from or based out of? Where, like, what is the location of you as an artist?
I'm currently living in San Diego, so Southern California.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then you have roots in Costa Rica, or have you always been based out of California?
I definitely have roots in Costa Rica, but most of my life I've been here in California. Grew up in Costa Rica when I was really little, though. So like 2 years old, then I moved to the States.
Nice. And do you ever feel inspired by music from Costa Rica, or is it similar to what you hear in California? Or is it totally different music cultures?
I'd say yes, I'm inspired by that. Very different. More of the traditional music, though. I'm not following anything that's modern coming out of there. I'm sure there's really good music, but I'm just not really following any of that. But the music that I grew up with, more traditional folk style, like Costa Rican music, I love that stuff. So it's very inspiring.
Is there any particular Costa Rican artist or song that, if like I wanted to get a sense for what folk Costa Rican music is, like where should I start?
Well, there's like a national song. I'm not quite sure the name of it. It's terrible. I should know. But it's definitely more Caribbean flavor style with, like, I'd say elements of like Afro-Cuban style of rhythms. And that's one of my favorite things about that style of music is the rhythm of that. Maybe later on I could find the song that I'm thinking of and we can pull it up. But it's like one of the national songs that they have there. So definitely inspiring for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, that reminds me, Afro-Cuban. Did you ever listen to this band called Orchestra Baobab or Baobab, something like that?
I don't believe so.
I'll have to play you that after. Amazing guitar, like electric guitar, acoustic. I'm sure there's some like traditional stringed kind of instruments, but the production is wild because I think it came out in like 1978, but it sounds like music from the 50s.
Yeah.
And like the way it's recorded is so timeless and like kind of what I would describe as like stylish. Whereas like typical late 70s music, early 80s is pretty clean and punchy. This record in particular, it just has a really special sound. And that's what I've always admired about like Afro-Cuban music or Latin jazz, is like when it's recorded well, it's like, it's not just a literal interpretation, like snappy, punchy, clean. It's like, it has a cool room ambience or a really cool warmth to it that I really like. And I always kind of reference is like, oh, this is how music should sound, you know? So I definitely want to hear what that sounds like through the Costa Rican lens. That'd be really interesting.
That sounds familiar though, because like that's right along the same vein.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know there's a lot of studios, even in like the reggae scene. I think, is it like the Congo, the Fisherman. The track is Fisherman, but it's similar. Where it's like these mid to late 70s records that just like have so much more style than like the other stuff that was coming out. And in Keith Richards' documentary, he like went to one of these studios and he was like, yeah, there's like, this is where the kick drum goes. It's literally nailed to the floor. Like, they just have a sound, and it's like any Westerner that comes in, it's like, you're going to record where the drums are supposed to be recorded. You know, there's a lot, there's not all these like freedom and options. It's like, no, this is how it's supposed to be recorded. And I think that's really cool to have that like really specific heritage in a studio.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so I love finding stuff like that. So then as far as the music that you listen to in general, what would that be? Like, who are some artists that you think everyone should know or has had an influence on your guitar playing or your writing?
Well, right now I've been really into the new Sam Burton record. I'm not sure if you listen to him.
No.
Definitely more of a like nostalgia feel. More like that later 60s, early 70s possibly sound. And like, he's an amazing songwriter and another amazing production value to the record. Strings on that are phenomenal. Guitars, phenomenal. Drums, everything sounds great. Another artist lately has been Faye Webster. I've been listening to a lot of her lately. Just fun, cool music. But of course, I always go back to like Radiohead and Johnny Greenwood, of course, playing guitar. But yeah, I think lately been following some of these indie artists and just been really into that.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, let's break down some of your songs. So you have songs listed as J Hall, songs listed as Gentlest Gentleman. Right now, we'll start with Gentlest Gentleman. So I'm just going to play a little bit of In Another Life just to like refresh both of us. Slide right there. How did you get that sound?
That is a slide part. There's like a pinch harmonic technique that I use with slide and sounds pretty wild like that. But sliding from like the lowest note on like, let's say a B string or something, and then if you're using a pinch harmonic to slide up to the whole octave above the 12th fret on the same string, that gives you that kind of slide sound.
Wow.
That one was just like, I think that was a take from a demo that I just kept because it was just like, oh, that sounded great. Maybe it wasn't like totally recorded perfectly like I wanted in the beginning of how I thought of it, but it fit, so I just kept it.
And then this song just like grooves. Was the goal to create a groove, or was the groove something that happened when bass and drums were recorded for the record? Like in the demo, was the groove as defined, or did it become defined over time?
I usually start out with writing music with rhythm in mind, like what would drums sound like. And so I kind of, when I have a chord progression laid out, I'll design a loop or a drum pattern on my computer. And then if it feels great, then I'll keep it for the demo. And then for this recording, Dan Bailey played drums on it. So I sent him the demo. He of course understood like where the song was going. So he just did a pass on it and it was perfect. That was great.
Yeah. It feels like the right amount of hi-fi and the right amount of that kind of warmth I was talking about, where it's like, you don't want so hi-fi that it takes you out of it. But like from a groove perspective, it sounds like an expensive groove. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't sound, because sometimes you'll hear a track where it's like, that's programmed drums, and like, that hi-hat, it just, doesn't fit right. It's not sitting in the track, and then when you hear a groove that's just like locked in and just like mature, I figured it was Dan. I was like, I feel like Dan played on some of these, and this one sounds like Dan, but it's like, of course, that's why you pay Dan. He's got
a sound, and he does it extremely well. Like, that's just his thing. And so I trust what he's going to do.
Yeah. And then is Jon Joseph playing bass, or is that you playing bass?
Yeah. So that was Jon Joseph on bass, producing as well. And he was adding some synths on there as well. Yeah.
And then as far as, I guess we should tell people that the way I met you was through you playing guitar, electric. And so when you started doing your solo music, I don't remember when the first time I heard it was, maybe on Instagram. It doesn't sound like a guitar player who made a record. It sounds like a singer-songwriter who happens to have a really good guitar player in the band. Like, was that intentional, or like how much of it is a calling card for your guitar playing and how much of it is a calling card for you as a writer? Like, do you try to balance those things, or does the recipe just kind of organically create this end result? Are you trying to put one more front and center, or is it really just for you? And it's like, because I know the reason why I say that is I know Blake Mills's like second record he was like, this is specifically to show people that I could mix and I could produce. And that was really the goal of it. Some artists are like, I have to get this song out. Like, for your perspective at the time that you're working on this stuff, what was your goal with the music?
In the beginning, I'd say it was a little different. My approach probably was more like, how can I just write a song without playing guitar? Like, writing a song on a different instrument.
Yeah.
And so I've been writing music on guitar for such a while. I've been kind of just stuck in a thing. But switching to the piano really helped me out. And then from there, I went back to the guitar, knowing that, okay, guitar needs to stay out of the way and let lyrics or vocals or just whatever I'm trying to say in my songs, let that speak over the guitars. And the guitars can do whatever can support it in the best way.
Would you say that were you playing these songs as a guitar player as if you would play them for any other artist? Like, is that your philosophy in a session? Is it like, my goal is to just support, stay out of the way? Or is there a desire to have a style? Like, when people hear your music, it's like, oh, that's Jonathan's guitar. Like, how do you balance that like signature kind of sound? Because I do think you have a sound, but I think when I think of these songs, I think of the groove, and like you said, I think of your lyrics as being the main selling point, like the main hook to these songs. If you were working with another artist, is the process the exact same, or do you use this kind of like as a sandbox to try different things?
Well, as far as like the sound, usually for my music, I'm just trying to get experimental sometimes, and I get a little weird. So sometimes that might not work for other artists and what they're doing. So when I approach an artist's song, like someone else's music, I really just try to stick to the philosophy of what can support the song. Like, what does the song need, and what maybe does it not need that I'm wanting to do, but maybe I should pull that back.
So how much of these songs are you sneaking in those experimental things where you're like, I'm going to let go because I don't have an artist that needs to approve this. I get to approve this. Like, how many of those ideas do you sneak through?
I usually just send at least one just so they have one. But if they're asking for something very specific, then I'm not going to send them anything that's out of the box. I just give them what they're asking.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So let's move on to the next song. So this is Safe House. process like for a song like Safe House?
Lyrics are probably the toughest thing, I'd say, for me. It sometimes just is something that comes to mind in the shower or on the way to work or something that I'm in the middle of. So I'll have to quickly jot it down on my phone and then kind of come back to that later. But as I'm doing that process, I eventually come up with things that really mean a lot to me. And once I get to that point, then I really give it the attention to craft it in the way that I'm hearing it.
Yeah. Again, it's like, for me, whenever I hear a musician that I didn't know could sing, that I didn't know wrote lyrics, I'm always expecting to hear their musicality like first, like, oh, that's how they do a guitar solo. Or if they're a bass player, it's like, I'm going to expect a lot of crazy bass stuff, and lyrics just happen to be there. At what point did you decide, I'm going to do this like a proper lyricist would do this? Like, was that always the hook into the project for you? And how long did it take you to arrive at your lyrical voice?
I'm not quite sure what is like appropriate when it comes to lyrics. I'm still learning. And it feels like the people that I kind of get inspired from, who I just love their writing, it's just honest and real. And so as long as I can stay there as I'm writing my lyrics, I could trust that that's going to be something meaningful to me.
And how long were you singing? Because up until hearing these songs, I had never heard you sing. So it's like, I went from never hearing you sing to 8 songs where I love your voice in all of them. So like, what happened in between me never hearing you sing and then this? Are there other years and years of projects where you're singing on you just never released, or stuff that I didn't hear? Or did you start singing for this project?
I initially started singing for this project. I've done maybe like some live vocals, nothing in the studio. But yeah, singing, I don't think anyone's really heard me sing, other than listening to my music online. But I'm still in that process of discovering my voice. And I think I'll be there for a little while. But it's really encouraging to hear how it translated for you. And yeah, no one's really heard me sing, and then suddenly there's music of me singing. Kind of silly.
It's just so ballsy, because it's like Jon Joseph is a great producer. Like, at any point this could have failed, where it's like, I've never sung before. People know me as a guitar player. I'm going to have Jon Joseph like, were you nervous sending him demos, or were you just like, no, I like it and I trust my taste? Was there any point of like, was he the first person to really hear your voice on something?
I would say maybe the second person. Okay. I was working with other people prior to that to just kind of really develop a sound. And like those people were really helpful. And eventually it led to me working with Jon. And then by that point, I had already kind of found the sound that I was looking for these songs. And he was excited about it when I sent it over. And I was always anxious and nervous, I think, whenever I'm sharing music for the first time. But I was really excited that I got it to him.
Yeah, because like, I don't know how you are, but I hear demos all the time. And I always encourage a musician to try the artist thing, at least for a little bit. Like, even if you don't release it, because you learn so much. But often it's like, oh, they haven't found their range, or, they're trying to tell an entire 3-act story in like one song. Like, there's all these pitfalls of like vocalists who jump into singing and recording and all this stuff. And it's like, you managed to avoid all of that. And it's like, how did you do that? And how do we like extract that for teaching other artists? Like you don't have to be all things to all people. I think that's another thing that I notice with new artists. It's like, well, this big song is doing really well and this big thing, so I'm going to smash them together and this will make it a sustainable career for me. It's like, but you don't have that voice. You have different vocal muscles, like different years of experience, different stories to tell. And then you kind of came along and just found your niche. And I know you say you're still developing it, but to me, it sounds pretty developed already. So it's like, what were some of the guardrails that you had up as you were writing? Did you have any rules for yourself, or was it just intuition, like listening back to your own music? Because that's a challenge in itself, is to like objectively listen to your own music and know if it's good or not.
Yeah. I don't know how I could pass that along to someone else to kind of break through in that way, other than just trusting yourself. So trusting yourself, knowing your taste, and sticking to, I guess, the values that you have as an artist. My values came from just being honest and real as much as I can. And then, yeah, some of those guardrails possibly were there. I'm still not sure if they are there still or if they're gone. I'm in this kind of stage where I'm going to just do something because I believe in it. And so I trust myself. And I have other people that also believe in that too. So that's kind of what confirms that I should do this. So I don't know.
I love that. So yeah, specifically about this song, what do you remember about writing or producing? Does any kind of specific process element come to mind when you hear it?
For this song, well, I really love the tempo that we landed on. It felt great, and this song and In Another Life are actually written together as like maybe one piece originally, and then kind of turned out to be like ended up just being two separate songs, and then as I was kind of getting to that like stage of getting the production ready and all that stuff, yeah, I think the elements that Jon Joseph added, the things that Dan Bailey added, really just put everything together. The demo stage was a lot of just trial and error, and then taking it to that next level was working with Jon and Dan.
So yeah, I noticed that you kind of remind me of George Harrison's like composition and lyrical style and melodic style, and then also with the blend of the Beach Boys. So yeah, is George Harrison an influence?
Totally. Yeah, George Harrison, being a lead guitar player, I'm always going to gravitate towards George and his style of playing and his approach to writing melodies. Writing melodies as a lead guitar player, and also trying to not take up the space when there's vocals there. That's like such a art form in itself. And he does that so well. So huge inspiration. Beach Boys, of course, the chord changes. Everything about the Beach Boys in terms of just like the overall chord choices and sounds. I think everyone's inspired by that.
Are there any other artists from that era that are really influential? Like
the Zombies were really great for me.
Zombies.
I love the drums from the Zombies. Yeah, there's that iconic song I think that everybody knows. That the drums on that is just ridiculous, and so there's countless other artists from that time, but those would be the three.
Nice. Okay, cool. Let's listen to Rerun. Yeah, the lyric on Rerun that stands out to me is we never had any sound discernment. The way that you don't try to cram those words into a tight little phrase. It's like, we never had any sound discernment. And then it goes into the next phrase. I think that's what I like about your songwriting is you don't end it with a rhyme. And I don't know how intentional that is, but you're more, it's to me, it sounds like you're more focused on, like you describe it as the realness, like the meaning of the lyric than what a lot of, I think, songwriters fall into this trap of, which is like the catchiness or the rhyminess of a lyric. So a pet peeve that I learned from a music journalist was like, the meter is just super obvious. And it's like, oh, let me guess. Every word is going to rhyme with like sing, and now I know the pattern. Now it's just a matter of guessing which word you're going to choose. With you, you stay out of that kind of songwriter's trap. Yeah, like what leads you down the path of finding a phrase like we never had any sound discernment?
It's a very rhythmic line. So it has like almost this feel when you say it that way, but the actual like notes that I'm singing stay the same. They're not moving. It's the same note the whole line. And so that is, I don't know, that's very interesting that you picked up on that. But I don't have experience writing lyrics that rhyme and ever felt good about it. Maybe if it just like is a part in a song where it just happened to rhyme, that's probably not super intentional. I'll just might leave it in there, but I'm not going to think about doing it again unless it.
Yeah, I've noticed that when I'm mixing a song that I wasn't a part of, I can spot where a lyric is making the mix sound better, meaning it's serving in like the tapestry, as opposed to when the lyric is over rhymey and it's forcing everyone around it to kind of acknowledge and apologize for it. It's like when the lyrics aren't serving the song, which sounds ironic. I think a lot of musicians think the song always serves the lyrics, but sometimes the lyrics are the problem. And it makes everyone's job harder because it's like, do we cover up that line? Do we do a cool little thing here to distract from the line when the lyrics are truly the leader of the song and, like the best part of the meal, then everyone can do less because you don't have to overcompensate. And I think that's kind of what happens with a lot of these arrangements is it's like you're having to arrange to compensate for lyrics that maybe it's like, that's really rhymey right there. That's going to bug people, And so I think it's a good reminder for songwriters. It's like, focus on what makes the song real and not obsessing over the rhyminess. But I also think, I wonder when you're out in the world hearing a song in a store or on the radio or at a show, are you like grimacing or what is the word? Grimacing? Yeah. Like, are you bothered when you hear rhymey stuff, or is it only when you're writing that you notice you don't like the rhymes?
I don't think I'm bothered by rhyme. I think if it were a song that I write, though, I just don't think about it when I'm doing it. But if I hear it, if I'm outside and there's a song playing, that doesn't bother me either. I know that there's an art form to that as well. Like some of my favorite rhymes are like Disney songs. Mm-hmm. Like I grew up watching Disney movies and I love Disney songs growing up with like some of the classics. Like I don't know. So the first one that comes to mind is like Mulan. Like some of those songs are so amazing. But like the lyrics are pretty awesome and they rhyme and like it's pretty, I don't know. I think I could appreciate that.
So I wonder if it's something to do with the authenticity of the voice singing it. So it's like, I also kind of have this philosophy that certain voices do certain songs better and more authentically. An example I'll use is like Paul Simon will say that he can't cover a Bob Dylan song because Paul Simon has an earnest voice. and Bob Dylan songs need to have layers to them. And so when Paul Simon tries to sing Bob Dylan, it sounds like he's missing all of the double entendres and the jokes and the references. And it just sounds like here's a person who believes every word they're saying. And so I wonder if your taste is that rhymes are okay for this kind of genre, this kind of sound, but for the voice I'm working with, rhymes just don't even feel like a tool in the tool chest that is relevant. Is that kind of how you would describe it?
I would say it's more of, it is a tool that I just don't use often.
Yeah.
And not for any particular reason. It is something that isn't a natural thing for me, but I do appreciate it. And when I hear it outside, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. You're not like going to yank a speaker cord because someone rhymes.
No.
Yeah. I wonder, have you noticed if he can be kind of like George Harrison is kind of rhyming, but that's not what I think about when I think about his songs. I think about the melody, the chord changes, and it's like, yeah, it's something I just started noticing the more I'm working on different projects, different voices. It's like, how rhymey does this voice need to be versus how much can this voice get away without ever rhyming? And it seems to me that like there's a lot of satisfaction when a song just tells the truth and it's hooky without having to rely on rhymes. And that's kind of what I think about with the song Rerun. All right. So next we have, so Last I Heard. Basically leading up to that release. Was that intentional or is that just what came out? Because it's like I followed it where you rhymed, you ended "you're used to," but you drew out the rhyme until the very last phrase. And then I'm not a musical savant with theory, but I can see the numbers going around my head, and it's like you didn't return to home base until that point. And you're doing a lot of things melodically and chord to keep people engaged. And then before you know it, the song's basically done. And then that way it reminds me of a George Harrison Beatles song where it's like, it's short, but you're basically, it's like if it was a punchline, it's like the punchline is going to come way at the end and all of it's set up. And that's hooky on its own, but it's also like comedic from a songwriting perspective in that like you're really manipulating the audience really well in a satisfying way. But it's not just like, all right, like 4 bars and then we're back at 1 and then 4 bars, we're back at 1. It's like you're just dragging out the melody as the chords are changing. And I don't know if there's chord changes in this one. I do know you do chord changes, but how much of that is you messing with your audience in a pleasant way? And how much of that is like, oh, I had no idea I was doing that. It just came out that way.
This song in particular, I think was, I don't know, kind of like an experience that I had. And I just felt like having a project under my name for the first time, I felt like that was saying something to like what I've been doing for the last 10, 12 years playing guitar. And at the time too, it was during COVID. Everyone was locked down in their home, not really any signs of like getting back out and playing gigs again for a little while. But so that experience was really me saying no to the things that I used to do. And so this song is kind of that message. And then now this is who I am as a songwriter. This is like, yeah, this is just what I do now. And I also play guitar.
Yeah, it's almost like you're demanding time and patience through the melody. It's like, yeah, I'm evolving. It's going to take some time, but I'm here. And like, wait like 60 seconds to a minute and a half, and I'll give you the hook. But you're going to need to, it's like you're drawing them in. Like, it's story time. And like, everyone's waiting for you to do that thing in the story. And it doesn't happen until it doesn't turn around back to the intro until like way later. And the intro is so nice, but it's like, I'm more satisfied hearing the intro and then hearing all of the unraveling and discovery, and then be like, yeah, now we can go back to the intro. But I'll remember that because that was a little bit more of a traditional, meter. But like everything else is the surprise along the way, which I think is really cool. And then you also do that though in a way where it's like, you're not demanding that we pay attention to the surprise. That's another thing that would irk me, is if it was like, and I hope all of you guys know how awesome that was. Let me do a sick guitar solo that like walks you through all the chord changes. That's where I think it's a lot like the Beach Boys, where the Beach Boys have this really unassuming, boyish charm, but there's all this crazy boldness happening in this very chill music, where it's like, oh, interesting chord. Oh, interesting melodic note. And you're getting young kids to listen to that and say that's catchy. That's really impressive because it challenges what songwriters might think our audience expects to be hooky. It's like, no, hookiness can be really interesting, and I think this song does that really, really well. I also really like Dan's like space echo-y kind of snare rolls. Yeah. Those are really cool. And the programming too. But let's move on to the next one. This way. So yeah, in my head, this is the one with like the really strong backbeat. What was the process for Dan and Jon Joseph? Were they listening to scratch drums that you produced and scratch bass? Or was there just chords and then that? Who came first in that kind of puzzle?
Usually when I'm arranging my demos, I kind of just play all the parts that I'm hearing. So I'll do program drums or maybe even some loops that I'll cut up and edit. And then bass is something I'll just have an idea of. I'll do a pass of that. And then once I have the arrangement down, I might not even have lyrics all the way finished. And this song in particular too, the lyrics weren't done until maybe after Dan and Jon were already mostly done with their stuff. So I was still finishing the lyrics as we were doing that. So when I sent them the demos, I sent it to Dan first. Dan, he did a pass on it, sounded awesome. We talked about some of the ideas of where it could go, because the song could kind of go in some different directions in the earlier stages. And then once we landed on something, I sent it to Jon and then told him what we were going for, and then he also gave some ideas, and we ended up with something like a little more backbeat heavy. And his bass, he's got this really cool thing that I don't even know if it's just like
Is it a sub-octave?
I'm not quite sure. It's just like the part that he's playing is just an unusual part that fits really well for the song. I loved it.
I love how much low end there is to what sounds like an electric bass guitar. It's like an unnatural low end, that makes you pay attention to like the articulation of like the beat, you know, which is really cool because you get the satisfaction of hearing what sounds like a real instrument, but you kind of get some of that beefiness that you normally only get from like electronic kind of programming and, you know, subsynths and all that stuff. So if it's a real bass, it's a really cool trick where you hear all the punchiness of the bass, but then you feel all the bottom end.
That just goes to show how he's able to get such an amazing sound just playing his bass. Like, I believe that's just a P bass or something. And it's like he's running it through some really amazing like outboard gear, and that's just how it sounds.
Yeah, super cool. Really cool drum and bass groove together, which again is what I love about your music. Is I would say in that song, it's very obvious that you're highlighting the drum and bass, where I love that kind of selflessness from someone who is known as a guitar player. It's like you're taking on the responsibility of someone who's in charge, which is very George Harrison, because he did that with Eric Clapton with My Guitar Gently Weeps. It's like that's Eric Clapton playing the solo, because George Harrison to me knows what it's like to be a front man. It's like, no, I'm busy enough with the lyrics and the melody and the chord structure. I don't also need to be the guy that does the solo on this thing. Even though the song is called My Guitar Gently Weeps, like I'll have Eric Clapton do it. You know, it's like that to me is a true front man. And like to be able to know when you want to shine the light on another element of the arrangement and then shine it back on yourself and then shine it off. It's like, that's really satisfying to listen to because it's real. It's kind of like when you watch a show, it's like, oh, meet the ensemble. Here's everyone. Like, it's not just this one person. There's a really well-rounded cast. And I think that's what makes the music more compelling. Something real.
It was all you wanted to hear. That was all you wanted to feel. Hooked on something real. Real dark.
Yeah, this is another one where I hear those like kind of tropical Beach Boys chords. What are those chords that create that like island feel? You know, it's like it feels very like I think even on the cover, oh, it's like a pink, but it gives me like a flamingo vibe. It's like what is the what's happening in the music that creates that?
I think what you're hearing could be major 7 chords. Could also just be like 6 chords. I tend to gravitate toward those when I'm writing just a chord progression, just something that really is inspiring. And those chords are great, and I love them. So maybe there's a little bit of that's happening, and it's creating that sound. The other thing that you could be hearing is that I'm playing, I believe, an A minor chord, but I'm leaving like the third out of the chord, and so that it's really ambiguous. It could just be like a root and a fifth, so that's like a power chord, classic. But it could also be if you're playing like an open A minor chord and you just take off. So in this one, I'm just kind of avoiding the third note in the A minor chord in the verses, and that usually determines if it's a major or a minor. So if you're not hearing that third all the time, it can just be ambiguous, and then that creates tension. So in the approach that I have in music, it's really just about tension and release. And so if you can create tension as just like in a composition, and you're able to also release the tension at some point, that's the feeling that I think people really enjoy, or at least I really enjoy. There's sometimes when you hear songs that are just tense the entire time, and it's like, whoa. After hearing that, you just feel pumped or just like charged. But then when I write my songs, I like to do stuff in the verses where it's just like a little ambiguous because it gives that tension. But then when the choruses come in, that's where maybe sometimes I might have that release. And so then maybe you would hear that third note come in on that A minor. So it kind of defines it for sure. And then when you return to the second verse or something, it kind of does it again. So it's just like this playing with anticipation, playing with just what you're used to, and then kind of psyching your listeners out as a writer. It's kind of silly, but I love that.
And then you said you play a lot of 6 chords. What shape would you use for a 6 chord? Okay, yeah.
So like a G6 right here. I might have been able to use that. You can see that. That's how I play my G6. I have a thumb over the top, but you can play that like a bar chord. But yeah, you might hear a 6 chord or a major 7 chord. And then I think those chords are ones that I typically feel really inspired by. They give you that kind of sound that I think you're describing. And yeah, learning the chord types, I think, have really been an important thing as a composer, learning your chords. And if you know how to use them in a way where you're playing with anticipation, that's really can be really effective. So I love doing that.
Yeah, I remember in high school when I found, because I've always been more guided just by like my fingers, and so I would always ask our keyboardist, like, what shape is this? Because I love this chord. He's like, this is the 6 chord. I was like, oh my God, why doesn't everyone use this chord? And so I just wrote a million songs with that. And I don't hear a lot of guitar players using it as much as I would expect them to use it, because it is such a good voicing for a sound that is hard to pin. You know, it doesn't come with a lot of baggage emotionally. And I think that allows for you to do a lot of cool stuff with it melodically as a singer. Like, I think it sets up vocals, especially in indie rock, really well.
It's beautiful. A trip to the country. It was such.
Yeah, I definitely hear a lot of Jonathan isms of the guitar playing here. It's like that very last high kind of slide that we heard, and then the acoustic shape, and just all these kind of textures that feel like a lap steel, or feel like, you know, some kind of slide or some kind of pedal steel. Who would you say are some of the influences behind those types of sounds that you create? Because is it like Daniel Lanois or something like that?
I would definitely say I'm inspired by Daniel Lanois. There are a lot of Nashville players as well. There's a guy named Scotty Murray that I'm a huge fan of. His guitar playing has inspired everything I do a lot. And then, of course, like you mentioned George Harrison, he's amazing on slide as well. And so it's just, I'd say when I'm approaching, I guess when I'm approaching the guitar or anything like that, I'm just kind of thinking what resonates with me, what am I familiar with. And right now I'm really into these sounds from these players. And so Daniel Lanois, I listen to everything he does, and as far as like his guitar playing, and I get really nerdy about it, and then I try to study the same thing, or try to study other people the same way. And from that, I create my voice and I create my sound. And I think that's kind of how most people that I've heard, like when they talk about this, is like when you develop a sound, you start with your taste, and like then you start with learning other people's like iconic stuff. And then from that is like you're putting your own flavor to that. How do you interpret this sound as a guitar player or as a songwriter? And then if you're doing it enough, you can practice at getting good at that. So I think I'm still practicing, so I don't know how well it has been yet, but so far I'm having fun.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking with us. Yeah, check out Jay Hall's music, Gentlest Gentleman, as well. And we'll be on the lookout for new music coming from you. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys next time. Later.
Living out your dreams and